Hi everyone, my name's Caitlin and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing one of Britain's most notorious child killers called Mary Bell. We're going to be discussing the actual case of it and also some psychology aspects of it. If you don't have a big understanding of psychology, that's completely fine. I will try to explain everything to the best of my ability. I want to put a quick disclaimer out there. I'm not a psychology teacher. I'm an undergraduate student and I just enjoy psychology, and all of the information that I get from here is from either a news article or a research article. So I'm just kind of reiterating all the stuff that I found on the internet. With all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, make sure to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and let's get into the case. Mary Flor Bell was born on the 26th of May 1957 in England. Her mother was only 17 years old whenever she was born, and her mother was also a prostitute. Throughout Bell's childhood, her mother had attempted to murder her many times by choking her and by throwing her out the window at one point. And it is believed that her mother throwing her out the window may have been one of the main reasons which led Mary to committing these murders that she did, because whenever she was thrown out the window, she damaged a part of her brain called the prefrontal cortex, and this is an important part of the brain for decision making. By the age of 2 years old, Mary was refusing to bond with other children, and she was said to be detached and very cold. And when she felt sad, she didn't cry, she lashed out violently, and this detached demeanour was believed to be due to her mother's neglect. From a psychology aspect, by the age of 9 months, infants will form an attachment style. This will usually either be a secure, avoidant, or resistant attachment style. It is healthy for a baby to form a secure attachment style, so this baby will be dependent of their caregiver. They'll feel distressed whenever they're separated from their caregiver, and they'll also feel a lot of joy whenever they're reunited. And although the babies will be separated from their caregiver, they know that their caregiver will return to them, and they can depend on their caregiver in that way as well. With regards to Mary Bell, though, it does seem as though that she has an avoidant attachment style, and this could be displayed as not really showing any preference to someone, so they would be happy to go off with a caregiver or a complete stranger. Sometimes they are described as avoiding their caregiver as well. Unfortunately though, this attachment style is linked to neglect and parents or caregivers showing a lack of emotion to their infant. So if a child is being punished for going to a caregiver for help, they will most likely avoid seeking help the next time because they know they'll be punished. And I will discuss why this has led to Mary forming this attachment style, because she does get punished whenever she is with her mother. Like I mentioned before, Mary's mother did try to kill her quite a bit of time, and by the age of 3, Mary's family could recall many times in which her mother had attempted to murder her. And by the age of 4, unfortunately, Mary was sexually assaulted by her mother's clients. Bell's father wasn't really in the picture very much. He was always either at work or he was in trouble with the police a lot of the time because of armed robbery. And because of this absence of her father, Mary's mother tended to leave Mary with either family members or acquaintances, and there has been a report of her mother leaving Mary with a complete stranger outside of an abortion clinic. Whenever Bell started going to school, she did become known as the disruptive student, and she became known as a chronic liar as well, and also voiced her opinion of wanting to hurt people, which was usually kind of brushed off to the side because of her show-off personality. Unfortunately, by the age of 11, she did decide to act on these desires to hurt people, and she began hurting other children. On May 11th, 1968, Mary and her friend Norma Bell, who isn't of any relation to her, she's just a friend, they were both playing with a 3-year-old boy on top of an air raid shelter, and this 3-year-old boy ended up falling off the air raid shelter and he severely injured himself. At the time, it was believed to be a bit of an accident, and from what I was reading, I couldn't really make it out whether this boy had actually died or he was just severely injured. Either way, it was found out that Mary was the cause of this young boy's fall off the air raid shelter. The next day, mothers of 3 young girls went to the police to inform them of Mary's behaviour, and they had reported that Mary had tried to choke their daughters, and nothing was really done about this. They lectured Mary and they interviewed her, but that was about it. Not very long after these reports, on the 25th of May, Two young boys had been playing with Mary and Norma whenever they were in an abandoned house and came across the corpse of a young boy called Martin Brown. No obvious cause of death was discovered at the time, and it was assumed that Martin had swallowed a lot of pills from a discarded pill bottle which he had found. Only a day later, Norma and Mary were playing with each other, and Norma's father had reported finding Mary choking Norma. He ended up slapping her in the face and sent her home. Later that night, a local nursery school had been broken into, and police discovered a note, and there's a word in the letter that I do not want to say because I don't want to offend anybody. I know I did give a trigger warning of offensive language, but I don't feel comfortable saying it, so I will try and find an image of the letter, and if not, you can easily Google it. It should come up. But there was another letter, and it did say, "We did murder Martin Brown, fuck off you bastard." 4 days after the discovery of these letters, Belle decided that she would go to Martin Brown's family's house and request to see Martin. And obviously Martin's mother was distraught. She answered the door and she informed Belle that Martin had passed away, and Belle had replied saying, "Oh, I know he's dead. I wanted to see him in his coffin." On May 31st, newly installed burglar alarms of the local nursery school, which were previously mentioned, alerted patrolmen of another break-in, and these patrolmen rushed to the nursery and they discovered Belle and Norma hanging outside of the nursery, and they were both questioned on the previous break-in and both denied any involvement in it, and the police had let them go. After this stream of events which occurred, life seemed to settle down again. There was no reports of any deaths or break-ins, and that was until the 31st of July 1968, whenever 3-year-old Brian Howe was reported missing and an immediate search took place. Mary decided to inform Brian's sister that it could be possible that Brian was playing on a heap of concrete blocks which had been dumped nearby, and she had seen him playing there earlier with a pair of scissors. When this area was searched, Brian's body was unfortunately found, and he had died as a result of strangulation, and as well as this, Brian's stomach and legs had both been mutilated by a razor and a pair of scissors, which were both found at the scene. Due to the lack of force used to carry out the murders, medical examiners did assume instantly that the murderer was a child, and obviously detectives began questioning a lot of children who went to the local primary schools, and news articles they kind of told different stories, but I'll give you both sides that were told. The day that Brian had been buried, it was said that Mary had been standing outside of Brian's house, and a detective had seen Mary laughing and rubbing her hands together, so the detective had decided to go and question Norma, Mary's friend, and Mary revealed a lot of information about the murders. According to Norma, Mary had told Norma that she had killed Brian and she had brought her to the boarded up house afterwards to show her his body. Mary described to Norma how she had squeezed his neck and strangled him. She said she had enjoyed it. Although Norma had told detectives this, Mary refused to give any information, and she made a statement accusing Norma of lying. And whenever Norma revealed more information, which kind of put Mary into a bit of a hole, Mary eventually admitted to being present during Brian's death, but accused Norma of being the one who actually murdered Brian. Both girls were then arrested and charged with the murder of Brian and Martin. Now that was one side that news articles were given, and now I'm going to tell you the other side, which some other sources had been saying. So other sources said that detectives began questioning local children of their whereabouts during the time in which Brian died, and throughout this questioning, nothing of significance came about, but that was until they questioned Norma and Mary. Both girls were unable to give consistent answers as to where they were during the time in which Brian was murdered. Belle did say that she seen an older boy abusing Brian, but Norma almost instantly broke down and confessed to police that she'd seen Mary murdering Brian. During the trial, new evidence did come about that the local nursery school that had been broken into was very close to where Martin Brown had lived, and whenever the nursery school had been broken into, items such as cleaning supplies and also scissors had been stolen from the nursery school. Investigators did bring up the fact that they'd found notes, and they'd found 4 notes in total, with one of them saying, "We did murder Martin Brown," and another said, "I murder so that I may come back." During the trial, there was also testimony from other children that they had heard Mary yelling, "I'm a murderer," and pointing to Brian Howe's home and saying, "That's where I killed." While Mary was awaiting trial, it was reported that she had said to women guards, "I like hurting things that can't fight back." It was revealed that Mary was the only culprit involved in the death of Martin Brown. However, evidence did end up showing that Norma and Mary were involved in the death of Brian, and they both were involved in returning to the scene of Brian's body in order to mutilate the letter M into Brian's body. In 1968, however, somehow Norma was acquitted of all charges, while Mary was charged of 2 counts of manslaughter. While in prison, Mary was described as being intelligent, dangerous, and manipulative. And in 1970, just 2 years after she had been convicted of the murders of Martin and Brian, she ended up fabricating charges of indecent assault against one of her warders. However, this man was acquitted of these charges. And then 7 years after she was in prison, she ended up escaping alongside another inmate. However, they were captured 3 days later. After serving her time in prison at the age of 23, Mary was given anonymity to start a new life, and she ended up having her own daughter in 1984 and is now a grandmother. So I know we touched a little bit on the psychology of attachment styles at the very start, but now I'm going to go into a little bit more of the psychology side of it. So if you don't really want to listen to the psychology side of it, that's the whole trial and the case covered. So now we're going to look at a little bit of why maybe Mary ended up committing these murders. So like I mentioned before, Mary most likely had developed an avoidant attachment style to her mother, and this was because of neglect. There has been many studies which have shown the impact which neglect can have on a child, but the most significant and important psychology studies ever conducted into this was by a psychologist called Harry Harlow. His most famous experiment was conducted on young rhesus monkeys, and he gave these young monkeys 2 choices of a mother. One was a wire monkey with a cloth over it but provided no food, while the other monkey was made of only wire but gave nourishment of food. Harlow removed these young monkeys from their natural mothers just a few hours after they were born, and they were placed with these surrogate mothers to be raised. The study did demonstrate that although the monkey would go to the wire mother in order to get food and nourishment, it did tend to spend most of its time in the comfort of the cloth mother. This study did demonstrate the importance of love during childhood development. Additional research by Harlow did show the effects which a lack of love between an infant and a mother can have on an infant monkey, and this did lead to either psychological distress, emotional distress, or even death. So a lot of you might ask, what does happen whenever a child does form an avoidant attachment style? And children have been known to be very independent, they're very unemotional, and they have difficulties crying and resist physical contact. Whenever these individuals grow up and begin to have their own relationships, they do have trouble with intimacy, they tend to avoid it, and they have a high self-esteem and difficulties trusting, and there's a lot more symptoms that come along with it, but I'm not going to go into all of them. Personally, I think that her attachment style to her mother did play a vital part. There was also the trauma of her being sexually assaulted as a young child, which most likely did play a major part, and also the fact that she had a bit of brain damage as well did not help her one bit. So all of these factors, I think, would have played into the actions which she took later on in life. There has been other reports though that her mother suffered from a mental disorder. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I can't pronounce it. I'll put it up on the screen, but it's basically whenever someone fakes illness. It is a rare type of disorder for people to have, but they generally lie about symptoms that they have and make themselves appear to be sick and make themselves purposely unwell. These people tend to be dramatic about what's going on in their life. They may lie about being the victim of a crime or a loved one's death. They try to get the focus back on them whenever someone else is in a group and they're getting more attention than they are. That's just a few symptoms. I'm not really too sure how these two things could link, but a lot of articles did bring up this whole concept. So maybe it could be suggested that Mary's mother was too focused on her own illnesses that she had, which then led to the neglect. But I'm not really too sure about that one. So if you have any opinions on that, feel free to comment down below and let me know your opinions of it. I'm sorry if it seemed a bit choppy in places, but news articles were telling a lot of different stories and different views of it, so I kind of wanted to give an angle from every news article to try and give a broader picture of it. So I hope it did make sense, and I hope you understood the psychology aspect of it. That is the case of Mary Bell, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to hit thumbs up. Also feel free to subscribe for more videos, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.